By breakfast, half of Black Hollow Junction had decided Mara Quinn had finally lost her mind. She carried a clock mechanism from the abandoned signal tower into the depot dining room, set it beside the coffee urn, and accused the most respected man in town of stealing 12 minutes from the night her husband was branded a criminal. August Renshaw did not raise his voice. The division superintendent studied the rusted gears and asked whether grief had begun speaking through animals now. Everyone knew he meant Flint. For 12 nights, Mara's one-eyed rooster had crossed the rail yard at midnight and crowed beneath the tower where Owen Quinn once worked. Railroad men laughed whenever his crooked leg carried him toward the stairs. Even Mara had called him confused. On the 13th night, she followed. Flint climbed into the tower, pecked at a loose plank beneath the clock housing, and refused to move until Mara pulled it free. Behind it, wrapped in oilcloth, she found the mechanism Owen had maintained. 7 years earlier, a payroll train had stopped outside the timetable. $17,000 disappeared. Owen was accused of changing the signal, and when he died before trial, the town treated the accusation as a verdict. Now Renshaw offered to forgive Mara's cabin debt if she surrendered the clock and let the railroad protect her from a charge of stolen property. The kindness in his voice frightened her more than a threat. The clock was not broken. One gear had been filed so precisely that the mechanism lost 12 minutes before midnight. Mara placed a maintenance order beside it. The tower was scheduled for demolition before sunset. Renshaw called the damage ordinary wear. Mara asked why ordinary wear had been hidden behind a wall for 7 years. Then she said the name Cinder Spur. Station Master Elias Boone dropped his coffee cup. It shattered before Renshaw could tell him not to move. The room stayed silent after the cup broke. Coffee spread across the plank floor and darkened the toe of Elias Boone's boot. He stared at the shards, as if they had arranged themselves into a message only he could read. August Renshaw looked at him once, then turned back to Mara. Cinder Spur was abandoned before your husband's last season, he said. There is nothing there but rotten ties and windblown sand. Mara rested one hand on the clock mechanism. Then Mr. Boone has no reason to look frightened. Boone bent too quickly to gather the porcelain. His fingers shook. Renshaw told a waiter to bring a broom, giving Boone time to recover, then reminded everyone that the mechanism belonged to the Black Hollow and Northern Line. Mara could surrender it, accept forgiveness of the $480 cabin debt, and avoid a property charge. Otherwise, the sheriff would decide the matter. Mrs. Tallow stood near the stove with a dish towel twisted between her hands. She employed Mara, but the railroad supplied half the boarding house customers and nearly all its winter coal. She gave Mara the smallest shake of her head. Mara understood why Renshaw had chosen the dining room instead of his office. Surrounded by trackmen and clerks, he did not need to threaten her. Their silence did the work. The clock stays with me until Sheriff Price sees where it was hidden, Mara said. Renshaw pulled on his gloves. A widow should be careful about asking the law to examine her husband's tools. He left without raising his voice. Boone followed, stepping around the broken cup and refusing to meet Mara's eyes. The morning meal resumed in fragments. Spoons touched bowls. Chairs scraped. No one mentioned Cinder Spur. By 9 o'clock, Mrs. Tallow had moved Mara from the dining room to the wash shed behind the kitchen. I am not dismissing you, she said. I am keeping Renshaw from doing it for me. Mara plunged a shirt into gray water. He cannot own every stove in town. He owns the coal beneath most of them. Mara worked until her hands reddened, and the water turned black with soot from railroad collars. At noon, she carried scraps behind the shed. Flint waited beneath a warped fence rail, his red-black feathers damp from fog. His clouded eye faced her. The clear one watched the depot. She scattered cracked corn. Flint pecked twice, paused, and lifted his head toward the silent tower. His left leg trembled when he shifted his weight. You found the clock, Mara told him. That does not mean you found an answer. Flint ignored the corn. 7 years earlier, Owen had built a narrow roost beneath the tower steps, so the bird would stay clear of moving equipment. He claimed Flint knew the midnight freight whistle better than several new dispatchers. During Owen's final months, Mara had stopped laughing at such claims. The company withheld Owen's last 6 weeks of pay after the robbery, canceled his pension before burial, and charged Mara for damaged signaling equipment. Interest, cabin, rent, and legal fees had raised the balance to $480. A red notice inside her door said payment was due in 9 days. Renshaw's offer could erase it with one signature. Flint struggled with a kernel too large for his beak. Mara broke it beneath her heel and pushed the pieces toward him. He swallowed one, then started across the yard. His gait was uneven, but deliberate. He passed the water barrel, slipped beneath a freight wagon, and headed for the tower. Mara nearly let him go alone. Mrs. Tallow had warned that another absence would cost her the afternoon shift, and the demolition order gave the railroad control of the site. Yet men were already stacking rope and iron bars beside a flat car, marked Haskell Demolition, Territorial Contract No. 61. The tower had survived 7 empty years. Renshaw intended it gone within hours of Mara producing the clock. She dried her hands and followed Flint. The tower door stood open. Someone had broken the old company seal since dawn. Fresh boot marks crossed the dust, entered the machinery room, and stopped at the empty space where the clock had been hidden. The discarded records had been scattered. Several were missing. Flint climbed the first stair. His claws slipped on the worn edge, and Mara placed her palm behind him until he found his balance. At the landing, he stopped to breathe, wings slightly spread, then continued upward. "You have done enough," Mara whispered. He kept climbing. The tower smelled of old grease, wet wood, and rust. Through the cracked windows, Mara could see the rail yard narrowing toward the eastern cut. Beyond it lay scrub and the buried curve of a line no public timetable named. Flint crossed beneath the signal lever and struck his beak against the iron casing of the counterweight box. Once, twice, then again. 4 bolts held the casing shut. 3 were filmed with age. The lower right bolt had fresh scrape marks, and a dark streak of machine oil ran beneath it. Someone had opened the box that morning. Flint pecked until his head shook with effort. Mara lifted him aside, fitted Owen's old kitchen knife into the damaged groove, and leaned against the handle. The bolt turned a fraction, then another. Below, wagon wheels rattled into the yard.
"Bring the chains!"
A man called for the demolition crew to bring the chains. Mara removed the last bolt and pulled the iron plate toward her. A counterweight hung inside, black with grease. Behind it, pressed into a narrow space, was a folded strip of timetable paper tied with faded red thread. Flint made a low, broken sound. Mara opened the paper. 6 dates had been written in Owen's hand. All 6 were payroll nights. Beside every date appeared the same 2 times. 11:48. 12. At the bottom, beneath a smear of oil, Owen had added one unfinished line. "Ask Boone, who rang." Mara folded the timetable strip and slipped it inside the lining of her dress, just as the first demolition man entered the lower room. He was broad through the shoulders, with a leather measuring cord at his belt, and Haskell Demolition stamped across the front of his coat. 2 others followed, carrying chains. Behind them came Elias Boone. The station master stopped when he saw the open counterweight box. "You were told to leave railroad property alone." Mara rested one hand on the iron plate. "Someone opened it before I did." Boone's gaze moved to the fresh oil beneath the bolt. He did not deny it. Instead, he told the crew that the tower was unsafe and ordered Mara downstairs. Flint stood between her boots, his feathers lifted against the draft. He had spent what strength he possessed reaching the upper room. Mara could feel the tremor in his body when she picked him up. "What rang on those 6 nights?" she asked Boone. His face tightened. "I do not know what you mean. Owen wrote your name." That was not true, but Boone looked toward the counterweight box before he looked at Mara. The glance was brief. It was enough. One of the demolition men hooked a chain around the signal frame. Mara stepped in front of him. "Sheriff Price has not inspected the tower. He inspected the order," Boone said. "That is all the law requires." From below came the sharp strike of an axe entering old timber. Dust slipped from the rafters. Flint twisted in Mara's arms and gave a hoarse cry. Mara carried him down. Outside, the flat car had been moved beside the tower, and 6 railroad laborers stood near the ropes. August Renshaw had made the demolition look like routine maintenance. Men who had eaten breakfast with Mara now avoided her eyes while preparing to pull down the place where her husband's name had been buried. Sheriff Nolan Price arrived after the second axe blow. He was a heavy man in a brown coat, polished smooth at the elbows, neither cruel nor easily hurried. Renshaw walked beside him, explaining that Mara had removed company equipment and entered a condemned structure. Mara showed Price the filed gear and the maintenance order. She did not show him Owen's strip of paper. Price turned the gear between 2 fingers. "Could be where?" Ware does not file every tooth to the same depth. Renshaw smiled without warmth. Mrs. Quinn has spent one morning studying a clock her husband maintained for years. Expertise can arrive quickly when grief needs it. Price disliked being pushed, even politely. He placed the gear inside his coat and ordered the crew to stop until he had spoken to the county clerk. Renshaw reminded him that delay penalties under Contract 61 were $8 an hour. Then the railroad can afford the truth for less than the price of a mule, Price said. It was the first help Mara received, though it did not feel like trust. The demolition men withdrew to the flat car. Boone returned to the depot. Renshaw left with Price, but before crossing the tracks he told Mara that the sheriff's pause would expire at 2 o'clock. "You have mistaken delay for permission," he said. Mara carried Flint to the shade beneath the freight platform. His beak remained open as he breathed. She dipped 2 fingers into a water bucket and touched the drops to its edge. After a moment, he swallowed. The Rooster had brought her to 2 hiding places in less than a day. That did not make him a guide to every answer. Owen had trained him to expect corn and whistles, not to read timetables. Mara needed someone who understood the 6 dates. The depot records room occupied a narrow office behind Boone's ticket window. Mara had cleaned it every Thursday before Owen's death. Payroll schedules were kept in red-backed ledgers, freight movements in green, and signal reports in gray binders tied with cotton tape. If the system had not changed, the 6 dates would appear in all 3. Boone locked the records door when he saw her approach. "The sheriff halted the tower," Mara said. "He did not halt questions. I have answered enough of yours. You have answered none." Travelers moved along the platform behind her. Boone lowered his voice. "Your husband asked questions too. Look where that carried him." The warning sounded less like a threat than fear. Mara took the strip from her dress and unfolded only the bottom edge, enough to show the unfinished sentence. "Ask Boone who rang." The color left his face. He unlocked the door, pulled Mara inside, and closed it before anyone could see. "You should burn that. Owen already burned enough things." Boone paced once between the desk and the shelves. He said the 6 payroll trains had passed Black Hollow during his first year as assistant station master. Owen worked the East Signal. Dinah Mercer handled telegraph traffic. The official bell at midnight was rung from the depot clock to mark the change of operating day. "Who rang it on those nights?" Mara asked. "I did." The admission seemed too easy. Mara waited. Boone rubbed the bridge of his nose. At 11:48, Owen signaled that the westbound freight had cleared the junction. "At midnight, I rang the depot bell. The payroll run arrived afterward, exactly as the ledger shows." "Then why did Owen write both times?" "Because he was trying to make ordinary work look like a conspiracy." Mara studied him. Boone had spent 7 years protecting one version of the night. His answer came smoothly, but one hand pressed flat against the locked desk drawer. She moved toward it. Boone blocked her. "You have no authority here. Neither did whoever opened the tower box this morning." For an instant, anger replaced fear. Then someone knocked from the ticket window, and Boone turned his head. Mara pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a brass handbell wrapped in a gray signal cloth. Its handle had been repaired with black cord. Owen had used the same cord on Flint's roost after a winter storm split the wood. Boone seized the bell. "This proves nothing." Mara pointed to the clapper. A thin wedge of leather had been tied around it, preventing metal from striking metal. The bell could not ring. Boone looked at the silent bell as though he had forgotten it was damaged. "If this marked midnight," Mara said, "what did everyone hear?" A passenger knocked again. Boone shoved the bell into the drawer and ordered Mara out. She refused until he reached for the records room whistle mounted beside the door. The sound would bring Renshaw's men. Mara stepped into the office, but she did not leave the depot. Through the ticket grill, she watched Boone unlock the lower cabinet and remove a red ledger. He carried it into Renshaw's private room. 5 minutes later, smoke rose from the chimney above that room. Mara went around the building. The coal chute beneath Renshaw's stove had a cleaning hatch close to the ground. She knelt, opened it with the edge of Owen's kitchen knife, and reached through warm ash. Her fingers found a half-burned sheet. The top had blackened away, but the lower lines remained. 6 dates appeared in a payroll column. Each had been entered once in blue ink and corrected in brown. Beside the final date, someone had drawn a small bell. Below it was a line Mara had never seen in any official timetable. Midnight change called at 11:48 by order of A.R. August Renshaw. Footsteps crossed the office above her. Mara pulled the page free and shut the hatch. When she returned to the platform, Flint was standing despite his weak leg. His eye followed Boone through the window. Boone had not gone back to the ticket counter. He was carrying a leather dispatch case toward the eastbound train. The case bore the metal seal of the Black Hollow signal office. Mara knew what belonged inside it. The missing pages from Owen's tower records. The eastbound mixed train had begun taking steam when Mara reached the platform. Boone walked beside the baggage car with the dispatch case held close to his coat. A porter rolled milk cans between them, forcing Mara to slow. By the time she reached the car, Boone had passed the case through the open door to a conductor wearing a red neckcloth. "Hold that train," Mara called. The conductor glanced at Boone instead of her. Boone climbed onto the rear step. "You have no ticket and no business aboard." Mara caught the brass rail before the train moved. Flint, tucked beneath her arm, stirred at the first pull of the engine. The whistle gave 2 short notes, the second lower than the first. Owen had once said Black Hollow used that pair only when an eastbound train carried sealed company dispatches. Mara had forgotten the distinction until Flint answered with a weak, broken crow. The conductor looked down at him. "Get that bird off my train." Mara pointed to the case. "That belongs to the signal office." Sheriff Price halted the demolition and took the clock gear as evidence. "It belongs to the railroad," Boone said. "So does the paper you tried to burn." His hand tightened on the rail. The engine jerked. Mara stepped onto the lower stair rather than be dragged. The conductor swore and pulled the brake cord. Steam hissed along the cars as the train stopped after less than 20 yards. Passengers leaned from windows. Men near the freight platform turned to watch. Boone could force Mara down, but not without making the scene public. Sheriff Price emerged from the depot with August Renshaw behind him. Price ordered the conductor to surrender the case until he determined whether its contents came from the tower. Renshaw objected that sealed dispatches were protected business records. "Then we will open them in your office," Price said. The case was carried into the station master's room. Through the glass panel, Mara saw Renshaw unlock the brass seal with a key from his watch chain. The missing tower pages were not inside. The case held blank train orders, 2 current payroll receipts, telegraph forms, and an old route map. Boone looked relieved too quickly. Renshaw invited Price to search every pocket. Mara asked to see the map. The sheet showed the main track, water siding, stock pens, and 3 maintenance spurs east of town. Cinder Spur was absent. A pale rectangle interrupted the paper near milepost 72, as though a label had once been pasted there and removed. Mara held it toward the window. Faint pinholes formed a curve beneath the damaged patch. Boone said route maps were corrected whenever track was abandoned. His answer came before Mara asked a question. "What was removed here?" Price said. "An ash dump," Boone replied. Renshaw nodded. The men called it Cinder Spur because locomotive waste was left there. It never carried freight. An ash dump did not explain why Renshaw had ordered the operating day moved 12 minutes early on 6 payroll nights. She asked when the spur had been removed. 8 years ago, Boone said. "Before Owen's last season," Renshaw added. The answers aligned too perfectly. Price kept the route map but released the case. The eastbound train departed 23 minutes late, leaving Boone behind. Renshaw told him to bring every obsolete map and signal order to his office before 2 o'clock. "Mrs. Quinn has made it necessary to inventory our property." He wanted her to know the records would soon disappear behind his door, under a lawful purpose. Price warned Mara not to enter another railroad office without permission. He would ask the county clerk whether any plat listed Cinder Spur, but the tower would lose its protection at 2 unless she connected the filed gear to a crime. She had less than 3 hours. The county land office occupied 1 room above Kellum's feed and harness. Its clerk, Theodore Wills, disliked railroad disputes and widows without filing fees. Mara asked for the right-of-way plats around milepost 72. Wills opened the Black Hollow and Northern Survey book. 2 pages had been cut close to the binding. He blamed mice. "Mice do not use knives," Mara said. He closed the book. "Take the matter to Sheriff Price." Mara noticed a rolled tax map dated 1879, 3 years before Cinder Spur was supposedly abandoned. Wills demanded 25 cents to copy it. Mara had 11. She removed Owen's brass lunch token from her purse. The depot kitchen had stopped honoring it after his death, but Wills collected railroad pieces. He accepted the token and unrolled the map. Cinder Spur appeared as a thin black curve, leaving the main line east of town. It crossed 80 acres owned by the Black Hollow Fuel Company and ended beside a rectangular transfer platform. The company's registered agent was August Renshaw. The discovery answered why the spur mattered, but the map raised a harder question. A handwritten permit attached to the margin authorized nighttime use during payroll service. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable. Owen Quinn. Mara read it twice. Wills watched her face. Your husband appears to have known the spur was active. The letters leaned forward in Owen's familiar style. The Q carried the long lower stroke he used on grocery accounts and birthday notes. Beside it was his signalman number, 47. Mara had come looking for proof that the town was wrong. Instead, she found a document supporting the accusation that had ruined him. Mara remembered Owen signing household notes at the kitchen table, pressing hard enough to leave the letters embossed on the page beneath. The permit showed the shape of his hand, but not the pressure. It looked familiar without feeling alive. That difference was too slight for a court and too painful for her to ignore. For the first time since finding the clock, she wondered whether the town's verdict might contain one true piece buried inside the lie. Flint shifted inside the basket at her feet. The morning had exhausted him, so Mara had lined it with a folded apron. Now he pushed upright and tapped his beak against the wooden rim as Wills began rolling the map. A small triangle had been drawn beside Owen's signature. Mara had seen the mark on notes he left near the stove. It meant copied, not original. She asked where the permit had come from. Wills checked the filing notation. The county received it 3 days after Owen died. Elias Boone submitted it with a sworn statement that the original was missing. Relief came too quickly. A copy could still be accurate, and Owen's signature could still be genuine. The triangle proved only that someone reproduced the permit after his death. Who witnessed it? The witness line contained 2 initials, D.M. Dinah Mercer. Wills said Dinah had worked the telegraph desk during the payroll years but left Black Hollow soon after the robbery. She now lived beyond Mercy Wash and repaired clocks for ranch families. Mara laid the half-burned payroll sheet beside the permit. The 6 dates matched 6 tiny black dots drawn along Cinder Spur. Each dot stood beside the transfer platform. The spur had not merely existed, it had been scheduled. When Wills rolled the map, a narrow strip of paper slipped from the back and fell beneath the desk. Flint struck the basket rim hard enough to draw Mara's attention first. The strip was an index receipt recording the removal of the original Cinder Spur permit from the county files. Date removed. The morning after the payroll robbery. Release to A. Renshaw. Purpose. Signature verification. There was no return date. Mercy Wash lay 5 miles beyond the eastern cut, where pale gullies swallowed the railroad's distant metal hum. Mara borrowed Mrs. Tallow's delivery cart by promising to return before the evening meal. Flint rode in a grain basket beside her, wrapped in Owen's old wool scarf. He had eaten little since morning. Each rut made his stiff legs shift beneath him, yet whenever the track curved toward the rails, his clear eye opened. Dinah Mercer's house stood behind a collapsed windbreak of cottonwood branches. 3 clocks hung beneath the porch roof, none showing the same time. Dinah sat at a workbench repairing a silver watch with a lens pressed to one eye. She was 60, spare as a fence rail, with telegraph burns darkening 2 fingers of her left hand. I wondered which would reach me first, she said without greeting. You or Renshaw? Mara placed the copied permit on the bench. Dinah removed the lens. Her gaze went directly to the initials D, M, then to Owen's signature. Where did you get this? The county land office. The original disappeared the morning after the robbery. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Dinah pushed the permit back. Then take it home and burn it. Flint stirred at the smell of clock oil. He lifted his head from the scarf and gave a soft cluck. Dinah's face changed when she saw him. Owen said that fool bird would outlive every honest man on the line. He was nearly right. Mara told her about the filed gear, the silent depot bell, the order changing midnight to 11:48, and the 6 payroll dates. She did not describe Renshaw's offer or her cabin debt. Those belonged to the life everyone already believed small enough to bargain away. Dinah listened while turning the watch crown between her fingers. When Mara finished, she said the initials were hers. I witnessed the permit. Did Owen sign it? Yes. The word struck harder than Mara expected, though she had prepared herself for it since leaving town. Dinah opened a drawer and removed a bundle of telegraph strips tied with blue thread. Owen came to me 8 years ago, before the first missing payroll. Renshaw told him Cinder Spur would be reopened for emergency coal transfer. Renshaw said refusing the permit would cost him his post. So he signed. He signed a permit limited to coal emergencies. 1 movement per month, daylight whenever possible, never during payroll service. The copy in Mara's hand contained none of those restrictions. Dinah pointed to a faint break beneath the second paragraph. Someone had cut away the original conditions and joined the upper and lower sections before copying the page. Owen's signature was genuine. The authorization above it was not. Mara felt relief, followed by anger at herself for needing Owen to be innocent in every detail. "Why did you certify this copy?" "I certified his signature." Boone asked whether the hand was Owen's. "It was." "He never showed me the altered paragraph until after I signed the witness statement." "You could have said that 7 years ago." Dinah's fingers stopped on the watch crown. Her younger brother Caleb had been a brakeman on the payroll runs. After Owen's death, Renshaw showed Dinah a freight receipt bearing Caleb's mark and said the territorial prosecutor would charge him as an accomplice if she questioned the permit. Caleb had a wife with lung sickness and 2 small daughters. Dinah kept silent. Her brother kept his job for 6 months, then died beneath a coupling at Mesa Bend. "I saved no one," she said. "I only gave Renshaw 7 years." The confession did not make her brave, but it made her useful. Dinah spread the telegraph strips across the bench. On each of the 6 payroll nights, a routine message from the Western dispatcher reached Black Hollow at 11:46. 2 minutes later, Boone marked the operating day complete. At 11:48, the freight schedule rolled forward as though midnight had passed. The payroll train entered the next day's ledger 12 minutes later, leaving the interval between records empty. Mara studied the narrow paper strips. Owen filed the gear to make the tower clock disagree with the depot. Not at first. Dinah took a small brass key from beneath her collar. It opened a long box mounted under the bench. Inside lay a signalman's notebook, water-stained at the edges. Beside it, she placed Owen's stopped brass pocket watch. She had kept it for 7 years, waiting for the day its time might matter again. Owen had brought it to her 3 days before the robbery. The earliest pages recorded switch checks, lamp oil, wheel wear, and weather. Then, the handwriting changed. Dates crowded the margins. Owen compared the tower clock with the depot regulator and discovered Boone was calling midnight 12 minutes early. Only on nights when payroll moved through Black Hollow. "He asked me to send a coded inquiry to the territorial rail auditor," Dinah said. "Josiah Vane." The first message never received confirmation. Owen believed Renshaw's office intercepted it. The name matched a faded notice Mara once saw pinned behind the depot pantry. "Annual accounts subject to territorial review." She had never thought of the man behind the title. Owen altered the gear after that, Dinah continued. He needed the tower clock to preserve the true interval, even if Boone changed the ledger. Every 2 hours, the mechanism lost 1 minute. At false midnight, the difference became 12. Mara looked up sharply. He damaged his own clock on purpose. He created a second record no clerk could rewrite. That was the truth Mara had resisted since finding the permit. Owen had broken company equipment. He had signed the original Cinder authorization. He had hidden his investigation from her and used the machinery entrusted to him as a trap. The town's evidence had contained facts, but Renshaw arranged those facts into a lie. "Why Flint?" Mara asked. Dinah's eyes moved to the basket. Because Owen could not trust paper alone. During the final weeks, Owen fed Flint at the true midnight shown by his pocket watch, after the depot had already declared the next day. He paired the feeding with a short whistle from the tower window. The rooster learned the hour through repetition, sound, and light from the east signal lamp. If the clock vanished, and the records were altered, Flint would still return when the false interval opened. Mara remembered Owen coming home after dawn, with corn dust on his sleeve. She had accused him of caring more for the tower than for their marriage. He did not defend himself. He only asked her to leave Black Hollow if anything happened. "I thought he was shutting me out." "He was." The answer was not gentle. Dinah said Owen believed Mara would confront Renshaw if she knew. He feared courage in her, more than fear. On the night before the robbery, he asked Dinah to keep the notebook and tell Mara nothing unless Flint began crowing at the tower after the company stopped using it. But the tower closed immediately, Mara said. Flint did not start until 7 years later. Dinah opened the notebook to the final page. Owen had drawn the clock gear, the counterweight, and 6 small bells. Beneath them he wrote, The bird will call when the east lamp burns again. The east signal lamp had been dark since the tower closed. 2 weeks earlier, Renshaw's crews relit it while surveying the structure for demolition. Flint had not suddenly remembered. Renshaw had awakened the memory himself. A horse approached outside. Dinah swept the telegraph strips into the box and extinguished the lamp above her bench. Through the curtain, Mara saw Boone dismount at the gate with a deputy she did not recognize. Dinah pressed the brass key into Mara's palm. Take the notebook through the rear wash. Follow the dry channel until it reaches the old section road. What will you tell them? That I repaired a watch and saw no widow. Mara lifted Flint's basket. The rooster tried to stand, but his weakened leg folded. She settled him against the scarf and moved toward the back door. Before she reached it, Dinah caught her sleeve. There is one thing Owen never learned, she whispered. The 6 empty intervals were not used to steal payroll from the train. Mara turned. Dinah looked toward Boone's shadow crossing the porch. The money had already been removed before the train reached Black Hollow. Mara followed the dry wash until Dinah's house disappeared behind the cottonwoods. The channel twisted through pale clay, forcing the cartwheels over stones and exposed roots. Flint lay against the wool scarf with his eye closed. Twice Mara stopped to offer him water, and twice he turned his beak away. Behind her, hoofbeats entered the wash. She left the cart beneath a cutbank and carried Flint's basket up a narrow deer path. Boone and the deputy passed below without seeing her. Their voices traveled clearly between the banks. Boone said the notebook mattered more than the widow. The deputy asked whether Renshaw wanted Dinah arrested. Not arrested, Boone replied. Discredited. The distinction told Mara what would happen next. Dinah would be called confused, bitter, or dishonest. Her silence of 7 years would be used against every true word she spoke now. When the riders disappeared west, Mara continued along the old section road. Owen's notebook rested beneath her dress, its brass key pressing into her ribs. Near milepost 68, she reached a weathered shack beside a line of abandoned bunk cars. Ezra Pike sat on the porch, sharpening a cane tip with a pocket knife. He had once worked as a brakeman on the payroll runs. A coupling accident had crushed 2 toes and left one shoulder lower than the other. The railroad paid him $11 a month in disability relief, just enough to make honesty expensive. Ezra saw the basket first. That Owen's rooster? Mara nodded. Then something bad has remembered us. She showed him the 6 dates from the half-burned sheet but kept the notebook hidden. Ezra recognized every one. On those nights, the payroll train began at Red Basin, 93 miles west of Black Hollow. A paymaster counted sealed envelopes into an iron strongbox. The box was checked again at Mesa Bend, where crews changed and the train took water. By the time it reached Black Hollow, the seals appeared intact. Appeared? Mara asked. Ezra looked toward the rails. Red wax at Red Basin. Black wax after Mesa Bend. No official report mentioned 2 colors. Ezra explained that each envelope carried a worker's name and amount. At Mesa Bend, the strongbox was removed for less than 10 minutes under the excuse of weighing the payroll car. When it returned, the outer company seal remained unbroken, but several envelopes felt thinner. Men complained after payday, yet Boone's ledger showed full payment, and their signed receipts matched the original amounts. Did Owen know? He knew the train was stopping wrong. He did not know where the money went. Ezra had told him about the wax. 3 days later, Owen asked to see the payroll receipts. Before they could compare names, Renshaw transferred Ezra to a mountain grade. The coupling accident happened during his first week there. Mara asked whether it had been deliberate. I never saw the hand that loosened the pin. Ezra slid the knife closed. That is not the same as saying no hand touched it. Inside the shack, he opened a tin box containing 7 years of disability statements. Each payment carried a deduction for company housing, although Ezra owned the shack. Another line charged him for medical supplies he had never received. The deductions varied, but the final amount always left him $11. Mara compared the statements with Owen's 6 dates. The first false housing charge appeared 1 month after the earliest payroll interval. Similar deductions followed every listed night. Ezra gave her 3 names: Amos Bell, Ruth Harlan, and Luis Ortega. All had worked the western section. All claimed short pay. Within a year, Bell lost 40 acres to a railroad lien. Harlan's widow surrendered her boarding rooms, and Ortega signed away grazing rights beside Cinder Spur. The missing $17,000 had been only the sum named in Owen's accusation. Smaller amounts had been taken from wages before and after that night, then replaced with debts the workers could never disprove. Mara felt the case widen beyond the tower. Owen's name mattered, but so did families who had left Black Hollow, believing their own poverty was failure. Ezra pointed to a shelf above the stove. A leather pay envelope sat there, preserved beneath a chipped mug. His name was written across the front. The flap bore black wax and a circular stamp with a break at the lower edge. The company said I opened it and spent the difference, he said. I kept it because I wanted one thing in my house that remembered I was not lying. Mara held the envelope near the window. The broken circle resembled the black half marks Owen had drawn beside the payroll dates. It was not a code for a train. It was the damaged edge of a seal. Flint opened his clear eye. He pushed upright in the basket and pecked once at the envelope. A trace of dark grit fell from the wax onto the scarf. Mara rubbed it between her fingers. It smelled faintly of coal oil and something sweeter. Molasses, Ezra said. Mesa Bend's freight room stored lamp oil beside barrels of molasses shipped east. Red Basin used pine tar to soften sealing wax. The black wax had been made or reheated at Mesa Bend. That gave them a place, but not a person. Ezra refused to testify. Renshaw's office could stop his disability money before any hearing began. Mara reminded him that $11 was already being stolen from him in pieces. It still buys flour, he said. She did not call him a coward. Dinah's silence had taught her how easily fear could wear the shape of duty. Before leaving, Mara asked about the transfer platform at Cinderspur. Ezra said payroll money was never unloaded there. The spur received something more useful to Renshaw: foreclosed tools, livestock, and household goods taken from workers who fell behind on company debts. Goods were moved onto freight cars at night and sold through an agent in Santa Fe. The 12-minute gap concealed the property transfers, not the original theft. Renshaw stole wages at Mesa Bend, created shortages in Black Hollow, then used Cinderspur to remove what families lost when those shortages became debt. The system had two ends, and Owen had discovered only the eastern one. A whistle sounded from the direction of town. 3 long notes meant the main line was blocked. Ezra stepped outside and shaded his eyes. Smoke rose above Black Hollow, too dark and narrow to be from a locomotive. The tower, Mara said. Renshaw's pause had expired. She drove hard toward town. Flint remained curled in the basket, too weak to balance over the ruts. At the eastern rise, Mara saw the signal tower leaning against chains while men worked axes into its lower supports. Sheriff Price stood near the flat car, arguing with Renshaw. The county clerk had found no criminal filing that allowed the sheriff to extend the delay. Mrs. Tallow waited beside Mara's cabin with the red debt notice in her hand. A fresh line had been stamped beneath the balance. Possession advanced. Vacate by 6 o'clock. Renshaw had shortened 9 days to less than 3 hours. Mara hid Owen's notebook beneath a loose hearthstone before returning to the yard. She carried Ezra's envelope and the burned payroll sheet, but left the copied permit behind. Renshaw watched her approach as the first support beam cracked. "You were offered mercy this morning," he said. "Mercy does not change the date on a debt. Neither does grief change a signature." Mara held up the black-sealed envelope. Where was the payroll opened at Mesa Bend? For the first time, Renshaw's expression did not settle immediately. Elias Boone emerged from the depot carrying a red-backed ledger. He told Sheriff Price that Mara had stolen confidential wage records and was using an altered envelope to accuse the railroad. Price asked to see the ledger. Boone opened it to the 6 payroll dates. Every worker's receipt was signed. Every amount was complete. At the bottom of each page appeared Owen Quinn's verification number, 47. Mara stared at the entries. The notebook proved Owen suspected the time scheme, but the ledger now claimed he had personally confirmed the wages. Boone closed the cover. "Your husband did not discover this system, Mrs. Quinn." He looked toward the tower as the chains tightened. He certified it. The first chain snapped a brace beneath the tower. Timber groaned across the yard, and dust rolled from the lower windows. Boone kept the red ledger open against his chest while Renshaw asked Sheriff Price whether a dead man's verification number was sufficient grounds to end the matter. Mara looked more closely at the 6 entries. The number 47 appeared beside Owen's name in brown ink, each impression identical in height and spacing. Owen had not written those figures. Signalman, certified completed movements, with small steel punches issued by the company. Owen's punch had carried a nick across the top of the 7 after Flint knocked it from the tower desk years earlier. Every 7 in Boone's ledger showed the nick. That mark came from Owen's punch, Price said. It came from his tool, Mara answered. That is not the same as his hand. Renshaw closed the ledger before she could examine the paper beneath the ink. Convenient distinctions rarely improve with repetition. Mara remembered a line in Owen's notebook from the winter before the robbery. Locker forced. No loss except, no. 47 punch. Boone says replacement ordered. She had passed over it among lamp checks and weather notes. The original punch had disappeared months before the 6 payroll dates. She told Price the notebook could prove it. Renshaw immediately claimed the notebook was stolen company property and asked where she had hidden it. Mara refused to answer. Price's expression hardened, not because he trusted Renshaw, but because withholding evidence gave him little room under the law. You bring it to my office by 6, he said, or I search the cabin. Renshaw glanced toward the red possession notice. At 6, it will no longer be her cabin. The tower brace split. Men shouted and cleared the ropes. Flint struggled upright in Mara's basket when the structure leaned. His weak crow vanished beneath the cracking wood. Mara carried him away as the upper room folded toward the east. The clock housing struck the ground first, breaking into iron, boards, and a cloud of black dust. 7 years of silence ended in less than a minute. Railroad men began loading the wreckage before it settled. Renshaw ordered every piece taken to the company scrapyard. Flint clawed at the basket until Mara lowered it beside the fallen stairway. He limped through splintered boards, stopped at the remains of Owen's roost, and pecked beneath a strip of tarred wood. Mara pulled the strip free. A small empty slot had been cut into the underside, shaped to hold a steel punch. The punch itself was gone. Fresh pry marks scored the slot. Someone who searched the tower that morning had known exactly where Owen kept it. Boone watched from beside the depot. When Mara raised the wood, he turned away. The empty hiding place supported her suspicion, but Renshaw could call it another story built around missing objects. She needed the punch or proof of when it disappeared. Owen's notebook contained the report, yet revealing it now might let Price hand the only surviving record to the railroad. Mrs. Tallow met Mara at the cabin door. 2 company clerks stood inside listing furniture. 1 iron bed, 1 pine table, 3 chairs, a stove with cracked fire brick. They valued Owen's tools at $6 and Mara's wedding chest at $4. The hearth is next, Mrs. Tallow whispered. Mara set Flint on the floor near his water dish. He tried to drink, but could not hold his body steady. She supported his breast with one hand until he swallowed. His clouded eye remained closed. You should leave him here, Mrs. Tallow said. He cannot travel again today. The clerks heard her. One remarked that animals left after possession would be removed with the household goods. Mara wrapped Flint in the scarf and placed him back in the basket. She could surrender the notebook to Price, lose it to a legal argument, and perhaps keep herself out of jail. Or she could hide it again and let Renshaw accuse her publicly of stealing railroad records. Neither choice protected the truth. Mrs. Tallow carried an ash bucket to the hearth and deliberately dropped it. Soot spread across the floor. While both clerks complained, Mara knelt as if to help and slipped the notebook from beneath the loose stone into the false bottom of the grain basket. Flint settled over it without lifting his head. The company men finished their inventory at 5:40. Renshaw arrived with Price and a deputy 10 minutes later. Dinah Mercer came behind them in Boone's wagon, not under arrest, but guarded closely enough to make the difference small. Boone announced that Dinah had admitted keeping company telegraph strips for 7 years. Renshaw described her as a dismissed clerk, protecting her own misconduct. Dinah's face was pale, yet she stood straight. She was not dismissed, Mara said. She resigned, after falsifying a witness statement, Renshaw replied. Dinah flinched. Renshaw had found the one true fact most useful for destroying the rest. Price asked Mara for the notebook. She said she would produce it at a public hearing, with copies made before the original changed hands. There is no hearing scheduled, Boone said. Then schedule one. Renshaw smiled as though she had requested a favor beyond her station. He proposed a simpler solution. Price could compare the notebook with the ledger privately, return company documents to their owner, and end the disturbance before nightfall. Dinah spoke before Mara could answer. Josiah Vane asked for those comparisons 7 years ago. The name drew no reaction from the clerks, but Renshaw's thumb stopped against his glove seam. Dinah said Owen's coded inquiry to the territorial rail auditor had been transmitted from her key. She could reproduce the routing marks and the time it left Black Hollow. Boone claimed no such telegram appeared in the station register. Because you called the operating day 12 minutes early and entered it under the wrong date, Dinah said. Price now looked at the case as two systems of record, rather than one widow's accusation. He ordered a hearing at the depot at 10 the next morning. Renshaw objected that Price lacked authority over railroad accounts. Price replied that he had authority over burned records, altered possession notices, and any disturbance likely to divide the town. Until the hearing, Mara could keep the notebook if she placed it under seal at the sheriff's office. She agreed only after Price allowed Dinah to sign across the envelope flap and Mrs. Tallow to witness it. Mara removed the notebook from beneath Flint, wrapped it in plain paper, and watched Price seal it with county wax. The cabin clock struck 6. One clerk took Mara's key. The other carried her wedding chest onto the porch. Renshaw told Mrs. Tallow that sheltering Mara would place the boarding house coal account under review. Mrs. Tallow lifted the chest herself. Review it in winter. Tonight she sleeps in my wash shed. Renshaw left the yard without replying. Darkness gathered while Mara arranged a blanket beside the laundry stove. Flint lay near the warmth, breathing shallowly. Dinah cleaned his beak with a damp cloth and said age had taken more from him than the day's strain had caused. He might recover with rest. He might not. Mara sat beside him until the depot lamps came on across the tracks. At 11:48, the east signal lamp burned. A narrow glint returned to Flint's good eye. He tried to rise, but his leg folded. Mara held him as a faint bell sounded from the rail yard. One measured stroke, followed 12 minutes later by another. The tower was gone. Its bell lay broken in the scrapyard. Dinah moved to the wash shed door. That is not the depot bell. Across the darkness, a lantern flashed once, near an unused freight car, then vanished toward the eastern cut. Someone was still calling the false midnight, and this time, a train answered from Cinder Spur. The answering whistle came again beyond the eastern cut. Dinah wrapped Flint in the scarf and placed him in Mara's arms. That engine is standing where the company says no track exists. Mrs. Tallow brought a lantern from the boarding house kitchen. Mara asked her to wake Sheriff Price, Ezra Pike, and anyone named on the 6 payroll dates. Dinah led Mara along the abandoned section road, while the yard remained focused on the main line. They crossed behind the freight sheds. The unused car where the lantern had flashed stood open. A cord ran from a handbell inside, through a pulley beneath the frame, and toward the depot office. Someone could ring false midnight without entering the yard. On the floor lay black sealing wax, a pot smelling of molasses, and a steel stamp cut with a broken circle. The same mark appeared on Ezra's pay envelope. Dinah lifted the stamp with her handkerchief. Mesa Ben made the false seals. Black Hollow kept the tools. Beside the wax pot rested Owen's missing number punch. The nick across the 7 caught the lantern light. Mara did not touch it. The punch could explain every false verification in Boone's ledger, but only if witnesses found it there. She sent Dinah back to bring Price before Boone or Renshaw learned the car had been opened. Flint stirred when the signal lamp near the eastern cut flashed. One long light, too short. Owen's notebook described the pattern as a restricted backing movement. The switch engine at Cinder Spur was moving cars toward town. Mara followed the section road alone. The basket grew heavier with every step. Flint's breathing came shallow against her wrist. Once he tried to raise his head at the sound of wheels, then settled again. Mara wanted to turn back and place him beside the laundry stove, but the train was moving because Renshaw believed morning might be too late. Cinder Spur curved through scrub behind a ridge of coal waste. Moonlight showed the old transfer platform, its boards repaired more recently than the county map suggested. A switch engine waited beside 2 freight cars. Boone stood with 3 laborers, while a clerk checked crates against a list. Mara recognized her wedding chest among them. Beside it were Ezra Pike's toolbox, a sewing machine marked R. Harlan, and 2 saddles branded with the Ortega mark. Goods taken years apart had been stored in a warehouse and were being removed before the hearing. Boone handed the clerk a sheet. The clerk pressed Owen's number punch beside several entries. Mara stepped into the lantern light. You should strike harder. Owen always did. The clerk dropped the punch. Boone ordered the laborers to remove her. None moved. One was Amos Bell's son. Another had boarded with Ruth Harlan before her rooms were seized. They recognized the names on the crates. Boone said the goods were abandoned property transferred under valid liens. Mara asked why valid property required a false midnight, a hidden spur, and a dead signalman's punch. A horse approached behind her. Sheriff Price arrived with Dinah, Mrs. Tallow, Ezra, and 6 townspeople. Price had sealed the unused car wax stamp inside a flour tin. He stopped when he saw the warehouse. Boone reached for the list, but Amos Bell's son placed his boot on it. Inside, shelves held more than household goods. Bundles of payroll envelopes were sorted by year. Red company wax lay beside black resealing wax. A desk contained deduction schedules, lien notices, and unsigned wage receipts. Each family had a packet beginning with a shortage and ending with property transferred through Cinder Spur. The chain no longer depended on one witness. Ezra's envelope matched the sealing stamp. The 6 dates matched Owen's notes. The stolen punch matched Boone's ledger. The hidden bell matched the false operating day. The warehouse inventory matched property taken from workers after their pay came up short. Mara spread the envelope, stamp, ledger copy, and warehouse inventory across an empty crate, while Price named each item aloud. For the first time, the case could be followed without asking anyone to trust her grief. Price ordered the warehouse locked until the hearing. Boone laughed without humor. Renshaw owns the land, the track, and everything here. You found company records on company property. Records of company theft, Mara said, or records your husband helped create. He pointed to a rear cabinet. Inside were original movement orders, bearing Owen's signature. Unlike the copied permit, these appeared untouched. Each ordered a nighttime movement through Cinder Spur. Mara read the first. Owen had signed after the movement, certifying that an empty car returned to the main line. The order did not state what it had carried. His signature remained another fact Renshaw could bend. Boone saw doubt cross her face. He knew more than you want him to know. Flint gave a faint tap against the wicker. Mara lowered him near the cabinet. He could not stand, but his beak moved toward a dark stain along the bottom panel. The wood smelled of Owen's clock oil. Owen had serviced the Spurs switch cabinet during emergency coal drills, and the stain matched the oil he kept in the tower. Mara found a wire loop beneath the cabinet lip. When she pulled it, a false back released. A packet wrapped in signal cloth slid forward. Owen's handwriting covered the outer page. Duplicate movements, not empty. The packet listed every car sent through Cinder Spur, the property loaded, the family from whom it had been taken, and the shortage that began the debt. Owen had signed the official orders because refusing would reveal his suspicion. Privately, he copied what each car carried and matched it to payroll deductions. The final page was a draft telegram to Josiah Vane, Territorial Rail Auditor, naming Renshaw, Boone, and the Mesa Bend paymaster. Owen wrote that supporting pages were hidden in the tower counterweight and that Dinah held the routing code. Those were the pages Boone removed before demolition. Price turned toward him. Boone ran. He climbed onto the switch engine and released the brake. The locomotive rolled toward the main line with one freight car coupled behind it. Dinah shouted that the dispatch case had been loaded beside the clerk's desk. Mara placed Flint in Mrs. Tallow's arms and pulled the restricted movement lever. Nothing happened. The connecting rod had been uncoupled. Flint opened his clear eye at the engine's sound. With a final effort, he struck the basket rim in the rhythm Owen had taught him. 1. Pause. 2. 1 long light. 2 short. Mara looked toward the manual switch target. The pattern told the tower which route had been set. The switch still pointed toward the abandoned coal pocket, not the main line. Boone was driving into a dead end. Price and Ezra reached the pocket before the locomotive stopped. Boone tried to throw the dispatch case into the furnace, but Ezra caught its handle with his cane. The leather scorched. The papers survived. By 2 a.m, the evidence lay under county seal in the depot dining room. Dinah used the routing code to send Owen's message again through the county telegraph office. To Josiah Vane, Territorial Rail Auditor. Black Hollow records found. Public hearing 10 o'clock. Come before they vanish again. Mara sat beside Flint on a folded blanket. The Rooster no longer watched the tower. There was no tower left. Across the room, 11 families arrived with old pay envelopes, debt notices, and receipts they had once been ashamed to show. At dawn, August Renshaw entered the depot and saw the evidence where Mara's clock had stood the morning before. He removed his gloves slowly and asked Sheriff Price, who had authorized a hearing against the railroad. Mara answered first. The people whose time you stole. No one in the room lowered their eyes this time. By 10 o'clock, the depot dining room could no longer hold everyone who had come to hear Mara Quinn accused of stealing time. Track workers crowded the doors. 11 families placed old envelopes, lien notices, and property receipts beneath the railroad timetable. Sheriff Price moved the breakfast tables into a long row and set the county-sealed evidence where the coffee urn had stood. Flint lay in a basket lined with Owen's wool scarf. His breathing was steadier, but he had not tried to stand since dawn. August Renshaw arrived with 2 company attorneys and a statement signed by the Black Hollow and Northern Board. He wore the same gray coat and calm expression as the morning before. Elias Boone sat apart under guard, his burned dispatch case on the table before him. Renshaw's senior attorney began before Sheriff Price could call the room to order. He argued that the warehouse, ledgers, seals, punches, and movement orders were railroad property obtained through trespass. A county sheriff, he said, could not turn stolen business records into evidence merely because a crowd wished to believe a widow. Price admitted the question of ownership was real. Renshaw watched Mara as though the law had already returned the room to him. Mara did not begin with the hidden notebook. She began with Ezra Pike's envelope. She placed it beside the broken circle sealing stamp found in the unused freight car. The marks matched. Dinah added the pot of black wax and explained why its molasses scent placed the resealing work at Mesa Bend. Amos Bell's son identified his father's tools in the cinder warehouse. Ruth Harlan produced a wage receipt showing full payment on a week when her mother brought home $9 less. Luis Ortega laid down a lien notice, dated 6 days after the same shortage. 1 envelope could be disputed. 11 formed a pattern. The attorney called the pattern coincidence and asked whether any witness had seen Renshaw remove money from a payroll box. No one had. He reminded the room that suspicion was not proof and that company property remained company property. Mara agreed. Then she placed the half-burned payroll sheet beside the silent handbell, the 1148 order, and the 6 dates from Owen's notes. Dinah explained the false operating day change. Sheriff Price showed the court-sealed number punch recovered at Cinderspur. Its nicked 7 matched every verification mark in Boone's red ledger. The ledger does not prove Owen certified the wages, Mara said. It proves someone possessed his missing punch. Renshaw's attorney answered with 6 original movement orders. He produced Owen's 6 signed movement orders and Dinah's witness statement. Owen had authorized Cinderspur, verified night movements, altered the tower clock, and hidden records. The attorney argued that Owen built the system, then left accusations to protect himself. Dinah was called a dishonest witness who had certified a false permit and hidden company telegrams. The attorney asked why anyone should trust her now. "Because I am telling you exactly where I failed," she said. Mr. Renshaw's version requires every guilty man to look innocent and every frightened witness to remain silent forever. The answer did not erase her signature. Renshaw expressed sorrow for the families and blamed Boone and the Mesa Bend paymaster for an unauthorized scheme. "Managing hundreds of miles of track," he said, "made it impossible to know every clerk's act." Boone understood he was being offered as the entire crime. He stood and said Renshaw was right. Boone claimed he altered the ledger, moved, seized property, and used Owen's punch without Renshaw's knowledge. He asked Price to record that Renshaw had helped uncover the misconduct. Mara opened Owen's duplicate movement packet. Every listed car carried a property description and the name of the family from whom it had been taken. Beside each entry, Owen had copied the authorization code sent from the division office. All 6 began with Renshaw's personal prefix. The attorney said Owen could have invented the codes. Price opened the scorched dispatch case. The surviving division orders carried the same prefix and instructions to move the goods before annual review. Renshaw's calm slipped, but only for a moment. He said the wording referred to routine inventory, Mrs. Tallow brought Mara's wedding chest forward. A fresh freight label had been nailed to its side during the night. The destination was a Santa Fe auction agent named in 3 older Cinder records. The lien number on the label belonged to Mara's cabin debt, although the possession date had been illegally advanced by 9 days. The system was still operating, while Renshaw called it ancient misconduct. Sheriff Price asked Ezra to testify about Mesa Bend. Ezra approached the table, then saw a company clerk near the doorway, holding a folded notice. The clerk raised it just enough for him to recognize the disability seal. Ezra stopped. His $11 a month bought flour and medicine. Renshaw did not need to say what would happen if he spoke. Mara did not urge him forward. No truth is worth pretending. Fear costs nothing. Ezra looked at Flint, then at his preserved envelope. He took the notice from the clerk, tore it once, and placed both halves on the table. He testified that the payroll box changed wax colors at Mesa Bend, that he warned Owen, and that Renshaw transferred him immediately afterward. He could not prove who loosened the coupling that injured him. He did not claim more than he knew. His restraint gave the testimony weight. At 11:20, a tall man in a dust-stained coat entered with the county telegraph operator. Josiah Vane identified himself as Territorial Rail Auditor. He had already been traveling toward the neighboring division office for its annual review when the county relay reached him before dawn. He handed Sheriff Price 2 routing confirmations, showing that Dinah's coded inquiry had reached the Territorial Relay 7 years earlier, then been canceled under Renshaw's division code. The message had not vanished. It had been intercepted. Vane did not announce a verdict. He said only that the Territorial Office now had lawful cause to seize the division accounts. The truth in the room had brought him there. He only gave it a door into the law. Renshaw's attorney demanded the hearing end before outside officials contaminated county proceedings. Renshaw reached for the duplicate packet, claiming it was still railroad property. Price blocked his hand. Boone began to laugh. He told the room where the missing payroll money had gone. At Mesa Bend, the paymaster removed small amounts from hundreds of envelopes, never enough from one man to trigger a major inquiry. A portion went to Boone for correcting receipts. The larger share moved through a fuel company account, controlled by Renshaw. When workers fell behind, the same company purchased their liens, seized their property, and carried it through Cinder Spur for resale. Renshaw called him a liar, trying to reduce his sentence. Vane opened the annual account book taken that morning from the division office. The fuel company deposits rose after every one of Owen's 6 dates. The amounts matched the missing wages within a few dollars. The room became very still. Sheriff Price placed Renshaw and Boone under arrest for destruction of records, fraudulent seizure, and conspiracy pending territorial charges. Vane ordered the Black Hollow account sealed. The company attorneys stepped away from Renshaw before the deputy touched his arm. Mara watched the man who had governed the town through courtesy and paper lose both. He offered no confession. He only asked whether she believed Owen's name would feed anyone. "No," Mara said, "but the wages you stole will." Within 6 weeks, the territorial court froze the fuel company properties. The railroad restored the 11 families' claims while a wider audit traced shortages across 3 divisions. Ezra's deductions ended. Ruth Harlan recovered her boarding rooms. The Ortega grazing deed was returned. Mara's cabin seizure was voided, though she chose not to move back immediately. The official record was amended to show that Owen Quinn had altered company machinery and concealed documents to preserve evidence after his lawful reports were blocked. The accusation of payroll theft was withdrawn. Late justice did not restore 7 years, bring Caleb Mercer back, repair Ezra's shoulder, or give Mara the conversations Owen had denied her. It only stopped the lie from owning what remained. On the first clear morning after the ruling, Mara carried Flint to the rise, where the signal tower had stood. Grass bent through the bare square left by its foundation. The railroad had installed a simple post, marking true time for the rebuilt junction, but Mara did not look at its clock. She set Flint on Owen's scarf beside the old stairstone. The rooster's left leg could no longer hold him for long. He rested against her hand, while sunrise reached the eastern rails. Mara took Owen's brass pocket watch from her coat. Dinah had repaired it and set it to the minute. Inside the back cover, beneath years of scratches, Mara had found a line Owen engraved before his final shift. Mara believed the time, not the men who name it. She had spent 7 years wishing he had trusted her enough to explain. She no longer turned that wish into forgiveness he had not earned. Owen had loved her, protected her badly, and left her a burden she never chose. All 3 things could be true. "I listened," she said. "It took me too long, but I listened." Flint opened his clear eye when the true midnight whistle from a distant night train faded in memory, though the sun now stood above the ridge. He did not crow. He lowered his head onto the scarf and closed his eye, no longer waiting for a signal that had already been answered. Mara remained beside him until the morning warmed the rails. Then she lifted the old rooster carefully and walked back toward Black Hollow, where the depot clock and the town clock showed the same time at last.